Hi everyone. As I mentioned in my last video, which wrapped up my long-running series on everything wrong with It Happened to Nancy by Dr. Beatrice Sparks, I mentioned I was hoodwinked not only by that book, but by also a number of other books, like so-called like real memoirs and diaries and such at that age, as well as allegedly true documentaries on television and stuff. And so let's just, keep that like theme going for a little while longer, talking about one of those other books I was hoodwinked by. This is The Lives of John Lennon by Albert Goldman. Now, if you're a Beatles fan and have been for many, many years, how could you not have heard about this infamous book? I don't think anyone in the fan community actually likes it or even has any kind of positive thoughts towards it at all, except for a couple of things, which, grudging credit where credit is due. They're not like, it's not all crap, and some of the things in the book, you still can't find that information anywhere else. But let's just start talking about this. And this is based off of a blog post which I originally wrote, and I published it in September 2013, but it was edited down from a much longer blog post I wrote on my old Angel Fire website in probably 2003 or 2004. I edited it down from over 2,000 words. I really could write, and so I did give it 2 stars on the Angel Fire website. I believe I also did the same star rating when I think I reviewed it on Amazon. I'd have to check, but if I did, that would have been more or less the same general review. And I still gave it 2 stars when I reviewed it on my blog and reposted and edited down that old review. And I do stand by that rating to this day. But I mean, there are reasons I wouldn't give it 1 star. It's not complete garbage, as I'll say later. So let's just start talking about why this book is just absolutely awful. A huge lesson in how not to write a biography. This lengthy piece of tripe gets that many stars only because, as horrible and inaccurate as it is, it made for very engrossing and quick reading and was interesting, lively, peppered with dialogues and scene descriptions, even if they weren't accurate, and wasn't a dull, lifeless biography. I mean, I'm not saying all biographies are that way, but sometimes they do tend to get a bit more dense, not really intended for like a lay person. It's more for like a serious academic or scholar instead of just a regular person off the street who wants a page turner, not necessarily a sleazy beach read type of page turner, but just, something like lively and compelling, feeling like, almost a novel or creative nonfiction about a celebrity they're interested in. It also includes things other of John's biographers haven't gone into much depth on, like Yoko's early life, her custody battle for her daughter Kyoko, and her art shows. And let me know if I'm wrong, but it's my understanding that to this date, unfortunately, there still hasn't really been a full length comprehensive biography of Yoko, which is really surprising. She's still with us. She could, give interviews, and you could just use so many resources. So many people would love to read about her. I really do want to believe the childish haters who are mentally in the 60s and 70s, bashing her at every turn and making it personal instead of saying, oh, I just don't care for her art or her music or politics or whatever, but I don't have anything else against her. These people, they're just such misogynistic, racist bashing of her. So I do believe those people are in the minority, even though they seem the loud majority when you're online, because social media is not real life. But anyway, all of that said, I adored this book at 14. I positively wolfed it down. Every negative story or anecdote only made me respect him even more, knowing he'd had so many problems yet overcame them, even the worst of the stories claimed by Goldman. Knowing, or at least thinking, he'd done these things only served to increase his hero status for me. He was just an ordinary human being with plenty of faults, not some sort of demigod. And believe them I did, until in 2001 at Mystery Train Records in Amherst, Massachusetts, I was looking at an old edition of People. A lot of people were saying a lot of it wasn't true. I was stunned and kind of disappointed that all these stories I'd believed in and treasured for years were nothing more than utter horse crap. And so many people who knew John personally, they spoke out against this book. The former Beatles, obviously, and I don't have any detailed information to know this if this is true or not. But allegedly, when Paul McCartney came to blast this book, this was allegedly a period of his life when he couldn't say a good word about John. Otherwise, I'm not really up to date about the details about like their feud was continuing beyond the grave or whatever. But, if he really was like, not having good opinions about John otherwise at that point in his life and still came out to blast the book, that should really tell you about how absolutely, crap it was, like in his not servants, like, people employed by him as like secretaries and stuff. They said it wasn't true. His friends said it wasn't true. Just so many, like his like relatives, things like that, his associates, coworkers, like people who had like worked with him in the studio, people he had like wasn't, I guess, like friends with to the end of his life, but they'd been like friends or acquaintances or hung out back in the 60s or something. They said, oh, this wasn't true. Like John never punched me in the nose and broke my nose. He never told me to, something really like disgusting, vulgar, off color, like Goldman says. This wasn't happening. Like, you're misquoting us. You're taking these stories out of context. You were interviewing me with really leading questions. And Harry Nilsson even claimed Goldman, tried to get him drunk, or said he actually said Goldman did get him drunk while interviewing him. And he probed Harry for dirt about John. And Harry, to his credit, even though he was drunk, he would not cooperate. And just, so many, just about everybody who knew John like came out to say this book was absolute garbage. Like, it just, like, nothing in it was true, and at best it was like severely taken out of context, or like misreported. And the few people who actually like, said it was true or were the people who actually gave the dirt, or they had some kind of like axe to grind against him. It's just like you're pretty much batting like everyone who knew him against a small minority of people saying this. It's just, it's totally imbalanced. Like, who are you going to believe? Like, almost everyone who personally knew him for the 40 years he lived, or a handful of people with an agenda to, promote dirt on him. I was too dumb at 14 to understand why it was so terrible. For example, a lot of the scenes involve John sitting and contemplating by himself. I mean, just think about that. How the hell was Goldman able to know what went on in his head when he was alone? Seriously? There's also no reason for Goldman to know what was going on in a quiet family scene if he wasn't even there. And John never wrote about it in a diary or shared with an interviewer, or like wrote someone a letter or something like that. I mean, seriously, and I know this isn't unique to this particular so-called biography. A lot of people do it, but if this is not a direct quote or a good enough approximation based on like diary or letter, interview, or whatever, like, how are you just gonna create a whole scene out of basically essentially your imagination, when like this was not a documented thing that happened at all? Just skip over that, or say, oh, something like general about that time, or just like, you don't need to like be creative. You're not writing a novel. You're supposed to write a biography. Like, basically stick to the facts. John was not bisexual. The scenes of him and Brian Epstein in bed together in Spain are horse crap. Goldman wasn't there either. John was always very frank in interviews, and I believe when he said that indeed it was a very intense friendship. Brian really did have a crush on him, but it was never consummated. Given how honest he always was, why would he lie about something as important as that? And I know people would say, oh, there was so much like homophobia back then. Why would he publicly out himself as like bi-curious and indulging? And Goldman also claims later John was like having sex with like underage, I guess, lady boys or whatever, or underage male prostitutes when he was visiting Thailand in the 70s. Like, and there's absolutely no proof given for that. Many other people who did know John said this was like crap. This is like, he was not gay or bisexual. Where is the evidence of this? And he would never have slept with an underage boy. Like, where was he visiting brothels in Thailand, or that he was frequenting a Korean brothel in New York City? Like, give us the evidence. Don't just make these sensationalistic claims and expect people to believe you. My excuse was I was like 14, 15 years old when I was reading this book, and I just didn't understand the importance of like vetting sources, and I didn't yet realize, oh, just because someone says it in print, that doesn't mean it's true. You have to, use your brain and see if things are adding up. And I do believe, even in the era of homophobia, I think John would have been honest and said, okay, this, happened. My primary like, sexual preference has always been for women, but I just, experimented, and that's that. I do not believe he would have like lied about something like that, even in such a hugely homophobic era. It's just like so stupid. And I kind of treasured this story for years. Oh, he was like bisexual. He wasn't afraid to do this. Oh, and he was so real and so human. I was just so stupidly naive. Everyone also knows John was an extremely devoted, loving daddy to Sean, just pouring out the love he'd been unable to fully give Julian as a boy, the love his own daddy denied him his whole life. I find it sickening I even would have believed for 1 nanosecond the horse crap Goldman spewed about how John was beating Sean. He also claims John threw the family cat down the hallway when John adored the cat. John never did as many drugs as Goldman claims. Of course, he did do a lot of drugs back in the 60s. Who didn't in that era? But he goes on to say he was still doing drugs, heroin and cocaine in particular, well into the 70s, and that he and Yoko had to undergo some very expensive withdrawal surgery for their drug problems. Like, this is just, he's making it up out of his own diseased mind. That is such unsubstantiated crap. John said he didn't like heroin that much and was scared of it after too many bad experiences. Oh, and speaking of drugs, Goldman also insinuates Yoko set up Paul McCartney's famous drug bust in Tokyo in the 1970s, 1980. Like, oh, Yoko had a cousin who worked in customs. One call to him and Paul was finished because there was like pot found in his suitcase when he was coming into Japan for a tour, and like so many other things he just like insinuates that are like completely bogus and untrue. And another untrue story, he claims John killed a sailor in Hamburg in the early 1960s when the Beatles were playing there in their pre-stardom years, and ever after he was haunted by it and had this kind of premonition that he himself would meet a violent end. And Goldman claimed John blamed himself for Stuart Sutcliffe's death because they had a fight and he hit Stu really hard in the head, and it caused like lingering brain damage that eventually came back to kill him a few years later. And just so like he claimed John urinated on nuns in Hamburg from a balcony and was laughing raindrops from heaven. Just I could give you so many examples of this crap he just makes up, and I just ate it all up at 14, 15 because I just was too young and naive to know any better. I'm also wondering if all the stories about the lost weekend are true. A lot of wild, scary stuff did go down then, which is substantiated by, actual legitimate sources and honest interviewers. But given all his other lies, I'm wondering if they're not just exaggerations. Goldman also puts words in John's mouth, like saying anti-Semitic things about Elliot Mintz, who was one of his best friends in America. I've since found out that John said he had a very nice childhood, was always fed, well-dressed, and taken care of by his aunt and uncle. Sure, it was naturally traumatizing to lose his mother twice. Once at age 4 when she dumped him with her sister, and again at 17 when he was just reestablishing a relationship with her. He said that in his own words in interviews, in addition to his low-life deadbeat dad who ran out on them when he was just a boy. But it's not like his aunt was beating him and constantly verbally abusing him like Goldman makes it out and throwing away his poetry. He had a very comfortable childhood overall, and I do know this is kind of a bit of the the popular enduring mythology about John Lennon, particularly the whole working class hero thing, and all the other 3 Beatles did come from very solidly strong working class roots, particularly in the post-war England. Like, who wasn't like proletarian, just struggling to make ends meet in the the post-war era of like deprivation and rebuilding and such. But John, he grew up bourgeois. He was not like from a proletarian family like the other 3 Beatles, and he just was not, like many people think, oh, he was working class and struggling and just living a different kind of lifestyle than he actually was. I mean, not throwing shade on him or anything like that, but it's just like a lot of people have this false assumption he really was like this like hard scrabble working class lad coming of age in post-World War II Britain like the other 3 Beatles, and he, wasn't. Goldman can't keep the facts straight. One such example is when he describes Yoko as a careful Oriental cook. Then in another section says she couldn't even cook rice without burning it. Many of his sources are people who either didn't like John or were dismissed from his inner circle for bad behavior, like May Pang and Fred Seaman. Fred Seaman, stole lots of John's diaries and such. He is definitely not regarded as like a a trustworthy source at all for like so many reasons, not just the theft of John's personal papers. Time magazine has also since shown that Goldman did not, as he pathetically claimed, conduct all those 1,000+ interviews for this teeming crapfest. Was Goldman there to know John followed Yoko around like a hawk when she was pregnant with Sean, even following her into the bathroom? Like, again, was he there? I also highly doubt he beat her because he wanted a daughter after Sean was born and was pissed Yoko was getting a bit too old to get pregnant again without massive efforts. Everyone who is close to John, as I said in the beginning, has said this book is a pure pack of lies. I was too innocent to realize Goldman was trying to make John and Yoko seem like the two wicked witches of the West. He even insinuated John was anorexic. Like, what? And ended the first chapter, or it might have been the prologue, with him in the bathroom trying to throw up from both drugs and bulimia. And it ends with a line like, he is trying to throw up his past, and that, of course, leads into the main meat of the biography. It really kills me how many times Goldman tells us what John's private thoughts are, especially when he was all alone or never audibly expressed those thoughts to his audience. At least he's not Jeffrey Giuliano. I mean, I've got to give credit where credit is due. Mr. Giuliano's biographies, they're even packed with even more lies and like deliberate distortions and misrepresentations and just like crap he made out of his fevered imagination. He even insinuates John had an incestuous relationship with his mother Julia. I mean, what? Where are you getting that from? That's disgusting. John admitted he touched his mother's breast once when he was a teenager, and he just felt like gross about that. He knew he shouldn't have done that, but that's like pretty much it. And you're insinuating even worse things on that. I'm just lost for words at what some biographers think they can get away with. Oh, I'll just print something sensationalistic and scandalous instead of sticking to the facts. I'm kind of even surprised Mr. Goldman got John's birth date right, because he got so many other things wrong and just like made up so many other things. And it's just a horrible book. Thank you very much for watching. Please let me know in the comments, have you ever read this horrible, disgusting book? Did you know it was false or like wildly made up at the time you read it? Or did you, like myself, only find out later? What was your reaction to finding out it was crap? Did you like read it knowing it was false just to keep track of all the, stuff that was a total lie, or just like that? And have you read any other biographies that you later found out were just sensationalized garbage with barely anything true at all in them? Or have you read any biographies of John Lennon you like that are actually not sensationalist crap like Jeffrey Giuliano and Albert Goldman? I've heard good things about Ray Coleman's biography. It's kind of ironic because it was next to the Lives of John Lennon on the shelves of the libraries and the bookstores I was reading it from before I finally took it out of the library myself. It's a long story why I wasn't just reading it through the library to begin with, and just read it in fits and starts every time I went to the library or bookstore for months. But maybe I'll talk about that in another video. And so it's kind of ironic I chose the crap over the much better, very held in higher regard biography. I guess maybe, but Goldman's biography, it's over 700 pages, and he said he conducted over 1,000 interviews. Why would I bother with a biography that's so much shorter? That can't possibly be very good or have many details. And Goldman, it's so many fun stories he's telling. I still remember so many of the things in this biography to this day, 30 years later. So just let me know if you would recommend any other biographies besides Ray Coleman's biography on John Lennon, or just other biographies in general about other people which you have enjoyed. And so thank you guys again very much for watching, and I will see you soon. Bye.